Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here to do my breakdown for My Hero Academia, Season 6, Episode 20. And when it comes to this episode, this was very much one of the best episodes of this part of the season of My Hero Academia, where we get a lot of good action, good animation, and it just looks good overall. So let's dive into the breakdown and talk a little bit more about what was great about this episode. And to begin, the title of this episode, Hired Gun, derives its name from manga chapter 312 of My Hero Academia, as well as this episode covers chapters 310 to 312 of the manga. And we start off the episode as we did with all the My Hero Academia episodes more or less, with a slight recap of what we saw in the last episode as we continue past it into the intro. And this is where the episode begins proper with the first looks at probably the best girl in all of the series. And we see this woman with a mutant quirk being attacked by a small group of people on this dark and rainy night, which is going to be a running theme and motif and feeling when it comes to not only this episode, but this arc, where we see that she's about to be attacked, but luckily enough, DEKU comes in and saves the day and chastises these people for saying some horrible things and doing some horrible things to this giant weasel fox woman. And let me just say that her aesthetic is very much amazing, and we do not know her actual name, nor do we know actually what her quirk is, but many people theorize it to be a fox quirk, while me personally, she looks more like a weasel. But from here, this is where we get the first line that is altered from the anime from the manga, where the line is changed from the manga to the anime to appear to seem a little bit less racy or a little bit less racist when it comes to these characters' depiction against the weasel fox woman. But they do add an added line of dialogue that you could imply that the reasoning why they are attacking her is just because of how she looks and not necessarily how she's physically dressed. And from there, we do see DEKU also begin to comfort her in the rain as her umbrella falls to the ground, as we see that All Might comes to help assist and take this woman away, as we get to see that the car itself is very much made to be CG and is not likely hand-drawn. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, especially for what we're going to be getting more of in this episode and most likely the next episodes, where a lot of the CGI most likely in the anime is going to be used towards the actual background and the buildings that DEKU as well as a particular character are going to be moving through. So it would just be easier for the animators to be able to animate these very well animated scenes that we're going to be getting with using CG on the buildings in the car while actually hand animating the characters in this CG format. But after this small scene, we actually get to see DEKU talking with Banjo as he appears in a vestige form. And we are still very unclear on whether or not they are physically here or not, but we see that Banjo and DEKU are talking about the state of Hero Society and how it's very reminiscent of what Hero Society was in the past during his time, and how they begin discussing what's going on with Tomoe Shigaraki and why he's doing the things that he's doing, along with what's going on with All For One. Where from here, we actually transition into a small flashback at the moment that DEKU was still in his coma talking to the other vestiges inside of One For All. And we start off with the first user trying to convince the second and the third user to actually work alongside DEKU, where we're actually introduced to some new dialogue that really adds to the idea of how DEKU is able to use the previous quirks of the previous users of One For All. And it's heavily implied that the reasoning why DEKU was able to use these quirks of the previous users is because these users are actually allowing for DEKU to have access to them, and that the second and the third users are not actively allowing DEKU to use their quirks, which is why DEKU is most likely not able to use those quirks at this time. And I really like this added dialogue because it makes the idea of DEKU being able to use these quirks a little bit more complex, but not that complex to not be as simple as we see that it is. And as we got another moment of silence during this scene, we get to see that Banjo decided to take the initiative and wanted him and the other vestiges to help DEKU learn about the quirks as the second, third, and first user speak separately. And from here, we finally get to hear the second and third users finally speak for the first time in the anime. And the second user is voiced by Daisuke Ono, who voices characters such as Erwin from Attack on Titan and Jotaro from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And the third user of One For All is voiced by Ryota Suzuki, who voices young Chojuro Sasakibe from Bleach and Arbus from Seven Deadly Sins. And in their conversation, we have the third user basically bringing up how the second user was trying to fight against All For One, and how the second user chimes in about how he did a lot of stuff to try and stop All For One, which led to a lot of bloodshed and death. And that even after all of that, he is very unsure on whether or not he can actually trust Deku to defeat All For One. But then we have the first user by the name of Yoichi Shigaraki, and then you have him talking to the second and third user about, even though they both knew that he was related to All For One, that they still lent a helping hand, which led to the creation of One For All. And this moment of remembering allowed for both the second and third user to finally begin to accept Deku and lend a helping hand, as we get an added scene of both the second and third users beginning to face Deku as a way of showing that they are now willing to help him. As well as we get a bunch of added dialogue as well as transitions of all of the users of One For All finally supporting Deku, as we see that the second user says that it's really, as you have the second user talking about how their plans are about to accelerate even faster now in the fight to defeat All For One. And this is where we finally get a good look at all of the colors that represent all of the previous users of One For All. And in this order, we have the first user who is white, the second user who is blue, the third user who is red, the fourth user who is green, the fifth user who is orange, the sixth user who is purple, the seventh user who is pink, and the eighth user who is yellow. And just to let you know, the first user is Yoichi, the fourth user is Hikage, the fifth user is Banjo, the sixth user is In, the seventh user is Nana, and the eighth user is All Might. And we see them in the respective colors behind Deku. And I would like to use this moment to really talk about the positives that we get in this episode when it comes to the good direction, when it comes to a lot of the camera work, as well as how the certain scenes are being paced, as well as we get a lot of cool art styles in this episode. As well as this episode sets an amazing atmosphere for the arc that we are in, as well as we just get a whole bunch of cool animation that is well done. But going more into the episode proper, we start this part with just seeing Endeavor going up against a group of villains, as we also get an expanded scene of some of these villains fleeing, but we see that Best Jeanist and Hawks are on the scene and captures them. And once Endeavor finally captures the villains alongside Best Jeanist and Hawks, we see that there is a crowd of people who are criticizing Endeavor and the rest of the heroes, and they are throwing stuff at them and trying to say that they don't want them here anymore. And what is very interesting about this crowd is that one of the individuals here is actually the former boss of Twice, whom we've seen in Twice's flashback that fired him from his job. And seeing how this individual, as well as the rest of the crowd, is treating Endeavor while being ignorant of their own plight and their own causes and their own consequences that led to the creation of this world, really shows the tone deafness that the people of the My Hero Academia world has towards the heroes, and actually the role that they played in their own downfall. And something else that I want to bring up is that we do get an added /chain scene that was in the anime, but is different in the manga, where we see that Best Jeanist is actually able to catch all of the flying debris from hitting Endeavor and Hawks using his Fiber Master, which is not necessarily something that was in the manga, but something that you can imply from the manga. So I'm glad that they sort of kind of changed or added this to the anime, because it really just adds to the scene as a whole. And going from there, we pretty much get a large chunk of the episode of just the pro heroes of Hawks, Endeavor, and Best Jeanist talking in the car and talking about the situation that is involving All For One, involving Deku, in a little bit more detail. And so they pretty much talk about how they have no leads on where the villains are, how they need to keep their distance from Deku while also using him as bait. They talk about All For One's plan to take over Tomura Shigaraki's body first, while he also talks about wanting to steal One For All next. They talk about how All For One needed Tomura Shigaraki because he needed a strong body and the hate to actually take One For All. However, they also talk about the fact that because All For One may lack hate, that's why he needed Tomura, and how when it comes to trying to take and capture All For One, that they may need to sacrifice order in order to get more people to search for the villains. And that's pretty much the gist of what they were talking about in this scene alone. And speaking on Deku, we do get a scene of All Might showing that he is tracking Deku, as he also has a small flashback remembering Night Eye telling him to get some rest, and how most likely he wants to tell Deku the same thing. We begin to have the fight about to start in earnest as we see that Deku is attacked by a mysterious individual at the same time that All Might is also attacked. And this is where we are introduced to another main villain of this arc by the name of Lady Nagant. And this is actually the same character that we saw during the Tartarus breakout. And to give a little bit more information on her, we actually get to see that her voice actress is actually Atsume Tanizaki, and that this individual actually voices some well-known characters such as Emporio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 6, Anya from Spy Family, as well as my favorite, Nikki from Dr.STONE. And we hear that Deku realizes that he is being tracked by an assassin and that she has finally arrived. And from the ad break, we see that the lines that Deku was saying in this moment begin to be reused over brand new scenes as we get to see a better look at Lady Nagant with a very tasteful close-up shot. And something else I would like to say is that we do get an added moment that actually adds to the character of Lady Nagant when it shows how she's able to create the bullets with her hair, as well as the mechanism of her loading the bullet into her gun through the palm of her hand. So I'm glad that we're finally able to get a little bit of confirmation about how her quirk is working, because there are moments from the manga that have been shifted a little bit slightly in the anime, which is when Hawks is talking about Deku and how there's a certain person that they need to track down. It is kind of interspliced between being a flashback and being in the present time. And Hawks is basically telling Deku that if he runs into this person and that they are pursuing him, that his best option is to run. And this is where Lady Nagant's actual name is dropped in the anime, and this is where the fight begins in earnest. And the fight starts off with very much an intense tone and looks awesome as we see that Lady Nagant fires a bullet at Deku, but Deku is able to catch it just in time. As we get a reused scene of Lady Nagant reloading her sniper rifle in her arm, as we get a little bit more cool interactions, and after that we get to see another cool action moment from Deku in this scene as we transition over into a more exposition heavy part of the episode about Lady Nagant in reference to what she's able to do. And the anime does this in a very unique way that I like, which is that it is done on a TV screen, because in the anime and the manga, what is being shown is actually a TV program starring Snipe. And this is where we learn a little bit more about Lady Nagant's quirk, which is called Snipe. We learn that she's able to create her own bullets from her hair that can have different properties, such as being hollow point and the shape allows it to curve, and that she can shoot her target from 3 meters away, but her accuracy is even superior than that of Snipe, who can literally hit anything within 600 meters with his quirk. So with this, we are really hyping up the threat that Lady Nagant actually imposes on Deku. And I like to say that after this exposition dump, we do have a cool animation scene of the gun arm that Lady Nagant has being filled and surrounded by smoke because of the fact that she just used it recently, which is really amplified in the anime than it is in the manga. And as we are approaching the end of the episode, we see that she has brought Overhaul alongside her and is keeping him by her side, as we get an added scene that is not in the manga of her telling Overhaul to be still, but the added portion is that she actually locks him in a nearby closet as she begins to pursue Deku. And how this transitions into another flashback where we get to see how Lady Nagant came in contact with All For One. And how we see that in this flashback, there are some added moments showing that she's one of the very few people in Tartarus that actually decided to help another prisoner and is actually carrying Overhaul when she could be escaping on her own. As we begin to get to see that All For One specifically went over to Lady Nagant to give her a mission to eventually go after Deku, which is shown in a very interesting way about how he's able to convey the information to her and convey the mission to her, to which Lady Nagant is very apprehensive to actually work alongside All For One because she did at one moment want to go out and kill him. But however, All For One is finally able to convince her to actually go after Deku by saying that he wants to destroy the hero society that she detests so much, and that the only way that can be done is by taking out Deku. Which leads to Lady Nagant agreeing to the terms of All For One, to which All For One gives her an incentive to actually pursue it by giving her the quirk of Airwalk, which ends this episode with Lady Nagant declaring that she's going to complete her mission. But yeah, that's pretty much my breakdown for this episode of My Hero Academia. I think that the anime did an amazing job adapting the material that we got in the manga in this format, because the action was amazing, the animation was on point, the background looked amazing, and just everything about this episode just clicked in the best way possible. So I can't wait to see what the next episode is going to entail, because hopefully it's going to be even better than this one. So stay tuned for my breakdown of that episode. But yeah, that's all I really have to say on the topic. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown. What did you think of the episode? What was your favorite part? And what did you like most about the episode? So leave a like down below, leave a comment down there as well, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified for whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!